They can benefit by reducing burnout, reducing resignations, increasing applicants to unfilled positions, and so forth.
So we live in an era where people not only want jobs that pay well, they also want a good work-life balance. Problem is, the job market isn't really set up for that.
People compete about money, but they don't compete about leisure time. So we get too much money and not enough time. My name is Juliet Schor. I am an economist and sociologist at Boston College. And I am the lead researcher for the 4-day week global trials of companies instituting 4-day weeks.
As technology and automation ramp up, Schor believes a shorter work week makes a lot of sense.
Well, what do you do when suddenly AI can do, 3/4 of the work that somebody did? You can just fire people and then you have an unemployment problem, or you can reduce working hours.
Juliet Schor is now leading an international study that's turning heads, not only for workers, but for companies wanting to reduce all the turnover they've seen of late. Schor spoke with journalist Rhoda Metcalf about her 4-day workweek mission as part of our special Women in Economics series.
I read an article of yours that came out a few months ago where you wrote that 2023 might be the year of the 4-day work week. So do you think it was?
It was the coming out year, let's put it that way. I think that we had some very notable changes. The UAW in the United States, United Auto Workers, putting a 32-hour week into their contract demands. And 80,000 steel workers in Germany also putting a 32-hour, 4-day week into their demands. We had the Scottish government announced a trial of public sector workers, which I am part of the research team for. The Portuguese finished a government-sponsored trial. So yes, we didn't get a 4-day week in whole countries this year, but the level of activity and most importantly, the level of government interest in this ramped up quite a bit.
Interesting. And you yourself have gotten a lot of media coverage over the past year. You had a TED Talk and there are various radio interviews. So tell me a bit about this study. Where is it happening and why do companies decide to try out this 4-day work week?
Sure. So through 2020, just about every 2 months, we started another cohort of companies pretty much all over the world. Started with Ireland, US, Canada, added the UK, Australasia, then did a sort of hybrid Europe and US, South Africa. We have Brazil. So we have completed companies, over 200 at this point.
Right. Wow.
Companies enroll in trials. They're 6-month trials. Before the trial starts, they get 2 months of coaching, mentoring to help them figure out how to get as much productivity in 4 days as they have been in 5, or just if they're not looking for that, but they're looking for some kind of benefit to figure out how to make it work for the company.
Because you really have to reorganize the way you do the work, right, to make this work.
Yes and no. So many companies do it that way. And that you might think of as the classic, how do you fit 5 days work into 4 days? And many companies do that. They change their meetings culture. They create focus time. They figure out how we can save time and be just as efficient. There's a lot of, let's say, less than optimal time use, particularly in white collar. But that's not the only way for businesses to make this work. They can also benefit by reducing burnout, reducing resignations, increasing applicants to unfilled positions, and so forth. So, for example, in the restaurant chain, that was one of our very first companies, they gave the benefit of the 4 days originally to their chefs, so that the top person in the kitchen and their managers.
Right.
What they did was then they hired some managers to fill in, but hourly rather than salaried, so they're not that expensive. And they rearranged the division of labor in the kitchen to take some of the work off the plates of the chefs. And what they found was that the quality of service and the quality of the food in the restaurants was really excellent. And they feel they got a quality boost for not that much money. And of course, they're not losing people in a notoriously high turnover setting, and they're using it as a recruitment tool.
So it really had a positive effect on the restaurant. But how about the rest of the companies in the study? I mean, how did the employees like it? And the companies themselves, I mean, how did they feel about this 4-day work week?
Employees are over the moon. I mean, it's game changing. And then people will write things like, this isn't just game changing, it's life changing. Burnout. 70% in the sample are less burned out at the end of the 6 months than they were. Burnout, stress, anxiety, fatigue, physical health, mental health. People are exercising more, they're sleeping more and better. So all those well-being dimensions. But one of the big things, and this relates to why the companies also love it, is there's a very big increase in self-reported productivity and workability. So people feel like they're doing a much better job. No. On the company side, very, very positive also. So the average company rating of the trial on a 0 to 10 is about an 8.5.
Okay. For
me, the strongest piece of evidence is the fact that almost none of them are reverting to a 5-day week.
Right. So what do they like about it? What do the company managers and owners, what do they like about it?
Well, they love the impact on the employees, obviously the collapse of resignations, but many of them are also telling us they have improved productivity and performance, or some are saying we have the same, but some are saying improved. I'll take Kickstarter, which was the quote unquote lead company in our second trial. Okay. It's an American tech company, which already had a little bit of a different vibe. It was a little more oriented to the public good.
Right.
So they have a set of organizational goals. They may have to do with projects completed or customer service tickets. They have things. They're a very data-driven company. They have things that they measure. And those are the things that they need to achieve in every quarter. And their performance on those skyrocketed.
Okay. Do you think that there are any special implications for women to having a 4-day work week?
Absolutely. We have about 60% of the people in our sample are women. What's interesting is when you look at the well-being changes, they are not different. But I think, we know that women are doing a higher percentage of unpaid household work, housework and childcare.
Yes.
So it really eases that to an extent that is a little bit different than for men. We have been looking at the distribution of household labor and whether it changes in heterosexual couples. Mm-hmm. And we are finding a little bit of change. So men are doing hardly any additional housework, but a bigger share of child care. So right. That's nice. And then the other thing is that, we're hearing people are able to spend more time with their children, and they use that off day to do that. We see reductions in childcare costs for people, and I think that's really important for women.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, leading up to this study, you have taught in various universities. You're a very prolific author. One of your earliest books, The Overworked American, was a New York Times bestseller, which is pretty amazing for a book on economics. A lot of your work has focused on the idea of time as a scarce resource in people's lives, right? Can you talk to me a bit about that idea and some of the other key concepts tied into your work?
I started looking at working hours Actually, my very first job, I was in a small college in Western Massachusetts, and I got interested in this topic. The question of whether or not there is a bias in capitalist economies to take productivity growth in the form of more production rather than more leisure. And so started thinking about that. Well, what is the interest of an employer in how productivity growth is used? More wages versus more time off. Does the employer care? And I developed a model showing that actually the employer prefers longer hours. In the standard economic models of the time, there was no bias. And the hours of work were driven by worker preferences. So workers, employees, whatever, had preferences for time and money. And that's what drove the time-money trade-off. And I said, no, that's wrong. There's actually a structural bias here. So we get too much money and not enough time. And so that's been a real through line in my work. In 2010, I published a book called Plenitude, The New Economics of True Wealth, which is arguing, let's think not just about wealth in goods and services or money, financial wealth, but time wealth. And then I did a lot of work on the relationship between working hours and carbon emissions and show that high emissions go along with long hours of work.
One thing that your work has brought up is this idea that Americans generally work a lot more hours than Europeans do, but that this wasn't always the case. So can you explain sort of how Americans got to that point?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. A lot of the work time data starts in about 1870 or so, people working about 3,000 hours a year. Then we have a long period of work time decline, which the U.S. leads the world in work time decline. So we get the 6-day week first. We get the 5-day week first from the 40-hour week. We're way ahead. Why? Well, we're richer. We have higher productivity. That's typically the story. And it's very contrary to this idea that the U.S. is a workaholic nation.
Yeah.
After the Second World War, it takes Europe a bit of time to catch up to us in terms of working hours. But what happens is, first in the U.S., we plateau on working hours. And there are a couple of reasons for this. The weakening of the labor movement in the U.S., and then you start to get really strong financial disincentives operating in the U.S., which are not present in many other European countries. The most important of which is the fact that healthcare is paid for by the employer. So it's a big tax on every employee, which means that the companies will prefer to hire fewer people and work them longer hours because they don't want to pay that extra tax. And if you had asked me, what's the first thing you could do to reduce working hours? The answer would be get healthcare out of the firm, put it somewhere else.
Right. So why did you decide to focus on these questions in the first place? I mean, did you grow up with overworked parents?
Yeah. So I think I grew up in a small coal mining town and also steel producing area of southwestern Pennsylvania. My father, who was a surgeon, had gone there to set up a clinic for mine workers. What it, I think, gave me, and also this is from my parents as well, was, I think an appreciation for working people and for unions and the importance of designing an economy that works for working people and not just for elites. So that was something I for sure grew up with, yeah.
So just going back to the 4-day workweek study, what kind of a role do you think that COVID, the pandemic, played in pushing your study forward?
Huge. I think the important thing about the pandemic is that it took an idea that had been around for a long time, but that wasn't really gaining much traction. And the word I use is turbocharged it.
Okay.
The shift to remote work really opened up a lot of management's eyes to what's possible. Something that didn't seem feasible suddenly worked. And so they were much more open to a change in work schedules. They're more open to a lot of changes.
Just shifts in general.
Shifts in general. What one CEO told me was the work from home, remote work taught us that we could trust where our employees work now, and it made us realize we could trust how much time they work. The second thing was the need for this based on what employees were going through, and which is the levels of stress and burnout, and then the labor market dynamics coming as a result of that, the great resignation, quiet quitting, disengagement, all of those things. And then the third thing that's kicking in now, and we've seen very prominent business people in recent days talking about this, is AI and digital technology and what it's going to do for the demand for labor. So we had Bill Gates the other day saying we're going to have a 3.5-day work week. And
because AI is leading to less demand for work?
Because AI reduces the number of hours that humans need to put in to do something. So it's such a labor-saving technical change. And then, well, what do you do when suddenly AI can do, 3/4 of the work that somebody did? You can just fire people and then you have a unemployment problem, or you can reduce working hours. And so I think that people who are thinking ahead to the what are the consequences of widespread adoption of AI going to be? Work time reduction is such an obvious part of that. And certainly if you think historically about labor-saving technical change, work time reduction has been absolutely central to the way we've responded to it pretty much, everywhere.
Interesting. I was thinking about how after so many years of writing and talking about the concepts and theories of reducing the work week, the fact that you're now part of putting that theory into action with this, international study, that must be quite thrilling.
It's fantastic, I have to say. After The Overworked American, which came out in 1992, and, as you said, it was a bestseller. It got a lot of publicity. I went to companies, and I had one, good-sized company came to me. I was interested in testing out some of these ideas and seeing, well, could you reduce working hours without reducing pay? And none of those panned out. I think it was just too early. And the size of the trials that we're doing, the size of the research effort, I have collaborators all over in many countries now, and creating this database, which is going to have data from all of these countries around the world that will then be available for other researchers as well. I mean, it's beyond my expectations for sure.
Well, Juliet Schor, what fascinating work. I mean, I thank you so much for taking the time to tell us about it on the podcast today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Juliet Schor is an economist and sociologist at Boston College. She was speaking with Rhoda Metcalf. Look for the other podcasts in our Women in Economics series at imf.org/podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on X, what used to be Twitter, at IMF_podcast. I'm Bruce Edwards.
And I'm Rhoda Metcalf. Thanks for listening.